CRISP, which stands
Yes.
for the Colleague Responsibility Information System and Protocols. It's all based around this notion that it's individual contributors, right? Subject matter experts who are distributed across several organizations, not just the buyer and the seller, but also the attending lawyers and finance, consultants who are in IT, contractors, whatever that is. And if you concentrate just on the information that's flowing, not within their work streams, but across the work streams and across the entities,
Yep.
that it actually collapses down into a very, very small set of data per person. And if you ask that question, what do you, here's the grand scheme, right? We're buying this company. We're going to need to incorporate the people into the organization. What do you, Ms. HR clerk, what do you need in order to do your job, given what I've told you? And this is the target date. And Ms. HR clerk comes back and says, well, I need a list of employees. All right. Well, what's in that list? Well, it's these things. Okay. Do you think anybody else needs that list? Yeah. IT needs that list. IT needs that list so that they can set up network accounts, set up email addresses, perhaps print business cards, whatever the dynamics are. And so I turn this whole model that says, let's do a predictive plan, or God forbid, let's try and do something agile,
Heathen.
in a in a predictably linear model that's all driven by the purchase and sale agreement and letters of intent. So there's this just really hard definition of when things need to happen, and like you mentioned, $2 million penalties if you don't perform like you're supposed to.
Yep.
Um, and it's it just makes a whole lot of sense to me. But
It makes sense in general. You see, what I've done in the past is I've this is for organizations, specifically for organizations that are repeatably going to go out and acquire, is used a, a racy chart where I've listed all of the staff, all of the tasks, and then said, okay, this staff member is relevant for this task. This one needs to know about the task. This one will be actioning the task. And that way, how I developed this originally for one organization was I did one acquisition and I kept the enormous email list for every single task. And then I went through, looked at the bottom, looked at the top, and thought, okay, these are the only people that were relevant. Tick, tick. And it just cut that email trail that went over weeks on some of them and wasted so much of so many different people's times because I knew that this person and this person, they are the relevant parties for this task. Just
yeah,
simplified things.
so my method is similar to a racy chart, but what I describe it
Yes.
as, it's all R.
Oh, yes, yes.
Because if everyone is operating under the protocol that what's in this, and I call it um, the device I use is called the nexus point exchange. So the whole model is based on these nexus points, and a nexus point is where a producer of something, whether they're producing it themselves, like a decision, right, um, is essentially entertaining a group of consumers across, again, outside of their individual work stream. And
Mm.
so it self defines right? So you don't have to do a racy matrix per se. You don't have to define anything. You let the the workers, the individual contributors who are actually doing the work to get it done, they define what they need, and then they get matched to the producers. And so you end up with essentially, again, this chart that's all R, who's responsible, the consultant or informed piece essentially is how the consumers interact. And if I'm a consumer and I need something from somebody outside of my functional area, well, it's embedded within what that nexus point is in terms of, is this person giving me approval for it? Are they giving me input? Are they giving me
Hmm.
information? And to your point, with regard to the email thread, how much of the information is predictable? And that's what my method, front loads this and says, look, you know what you need, even if you have never done this before. uh, you know, let's lay out what it is, because nobody's really creating anything new unless, right, within the confines of the agreement, whatever the purchase and sale agreement says. Um, all of this is just repetitive. It should be repetitive operational pieces that are already in place. At least 80%.
So
And so if
how do you get this to people? Do you have a course? Do you have an online program? How do you get, and who do you get this across to? Is it the project team? Is it the BAU team? Or is it the organization as a whole?
So that's a great question. And first, let me let you know that it hasn't been released yet.
Bummer.
So so um, in answer to your question, I don't know yet. But if indulge me for a minute, and hopefully this will work. I want to show you a two a 2 minute video. Here,
Yes.
this is my little intro.
Are you responsible for ensuring M&A transactions are successfully executed on time, within budget, and without drama and chaos? Did you know there is a proven method that accelerates delivery, improves deliverable quality and visibility, and uses your existing technology ecosystem to create significant savings on every initiative? Or that by using the method you can eliminate thousands of expensive meeting hours, reduce unnecessary administrative overhead, increase SME work satisfaction, lower hidden costs caused by interruptions, increase resource allocation visibility, and decrease the overall execution risk that so many deals experience? The method is called CRISP. CRISP is an acronym for Colleague Responsibility Information System and Protocols. CRISP is a field-hardened way to manage crucial pre- and post-close activity, regardless of the type of transaction, complexity, or size. Here's how it works. The CRISP method offers a structured framework of integrated artifacts and usage protocols to efficiently exchange vital information. But more importantly, it leverages the skill, knowledge, and experience of the people who are doing the work without adding to their workloads. And as the acronym suggests, deploying CRISP is a snap. With detailed step-by-step instructions, easy-to-understand protocols, pre-populated artifacts and checklists, and optional support, deployment of your first initiative can happen as fast as your organization can move. Faster, better, cheaper. Here are 3 examples where the CRISP method was successfully employed. Coordinating a $10 million acquisition pre-deal due diligence. Managing a $300 million spin-off, resulting in 8-week acceleration of technology stack readiness. And enabling the post-close integration execution of a $1 billion carve-out, resulting in an earlier-than-planned transition, 0 administrative issues, and dispute-free cost recapture measured in the millions. Welcome to chrismethod.com. Find out that where M&A transactions are concerned, faster, better, and cheaper can be a reality with CRISP.
Okay. This is going to be a problem, Chris, because I'm just going to totally destroy my reputation here. Excuse me for a second, because you're going to see that I'm wearing jeans. I haven't even tucked my shirt in. But a standing ovation there.
Oh, well, thank you.
That's excellent. But don't tell anybody about the jeans and not even bothering to tuck my shirt in, okay? That'll just be between you and I.
Okay, that's great. So that's essentially that's the pitch, and that's the opening to the website, which will be um, hopefully up shortly. It's got some elements to it that I am putting some final touches on. For example, um, as someone who has helped to procure right systems and consulting in this type of work, it's useful to know within the context of, in my case, the client, but whoever the client is, what your potential return on investment would be. And so I've got this model that's set up that essentially takes information on an initiative. Here, let me show, I can show you that too.
Can we cut
If
down on
you're,
meetings?
this
Because
is,
meetings are
this,
just so expensive.
yes, this destroys meetings.
Because you have half a dozen people in a meeting, the expense of that is just obscene.
Oh yeah. Oh no, this is crazy. Um, so
Because I know what
this
I
is
get,
the,
what I charge. So yes.
oh, I'm not sharing. Here we go.
Yep, there we go.
I'm sorry. I've been not navigating here. And so this is, I'll back up. So this is part of the FAQ, and I've filtered on the economics that have to do with the model. And so this is what kind of ROI or savings can Cris produce? And really, there are these five areas um, that it operates on, right? So you can accelerate the execution. You reduce the amount of rework because you don't have to um, the stuff that is incomplete, inaccurate, or unexpected, right? Um, the model and the ceremonies and everything are designed to essentially drive that out of the process. It also identifies a bottleneck and performance and allocation issues because when you're looking at essentially just the R right out of the RACI thing, and you're just looking at those things that are cross-functional, you can very easily see both from a work stream perspective, but also from an individual perspective, who is loaded as a producer, for example, or who from a consumer standpoint is, has a wide range. And the
So
way the
who's
model
your
is,
good, who's an essential stakeholder? Who's a person that's going to be overloaded by the workload that's coming down the
right,
track?
exactly. And the model allows you to essentially, there's no such thing as status or priority. So you want to eliminate meetings? All the status meetings go away. You do not look at interim status. Um, because it's irrelevant in terms of how the model is set up. And the same thing for prioritization. The prioritization of the actual deliverables. I don't talk about tasks; it's all deliverables. Really is embedded in the knowledge and the negotiation that goes on between the producer and the consumer.
Mm.
So and the MPX essentially gives you this visibility, what I call high fidelity observation, because it's at that deliverable level. What and Craig, it's at the granularity that the sponsoring companies or the participating companies need to deal with. So if your granularity for a particular nexus point is a 50-page report that comes out of some research unit, well then that's the nexus point. But it could also be here in the States, if you're starting up a new company, you need a tax ID number. Well, there are a lot of people in the circus that goes on who need that number. IT needs it, HR needs it. So anyway, uh, the other thing that it does is it avoids technical debt because the way that I've structured this, again, given my practitioner background, is there is no dedicated hardware or platform. This is not software as a service. This is an overlay in terms of protocol matching up with data schemas based on your existing tech infrastructure. So you don't have to train anybody. So that's another benefit. There's no separate training for using any of the tools because they are already using them. So what this ROI tool does is for a single initiative, it picks up the transaction value. Here, we'll do one together. So give me an initiative that you know of.
73.
How many?
73 million.
All right. So these are in millions. Now, how much of that 73 million can you express as a percentage that the transaction is that there's risk to it? So in other words, if it gets delayed, you're expecting some return on that 73 million. So how much of it is at risk if it gets delayed?
Well, you've got $73 up there, so I'm a bit concerned by that. But
well,
let's say
this is in millions.
Oh, I see. Okay. Yep.
Yeah. So 20%. Wow. Okay. That's pretty high. So we're going to say 20. Contractual. So these would be dollar currency amounts for missed deadlines, and this is in thousands. So if there are specific things where it
50.
says, okay, 50,000.
Yep.
All right. Now, here's where you kind of play around, right? How many days do you think the initiative is going to be delayed? So what I recommend doing is
30.
You can do best case, worst case, whatever you want.
Let's go for 30.
30. All right. So you already see down here, you're starting to see the transaction value impact is coming in at 14.6 so far. Most of it, I think, coming from this 20%. So daily consulting or external SME costs. So this is kind of an aggregate. You're going to have some amount of contractors who are working on this.
Yes,
how much is it costing you per day?
I don't know the number off the top of my head on this one. Let's say 30.
30 grand?
30,000, yep.
All right. And now for the internal side, we need an average FTE rate. So fully loaded for your internal employees.
82.
That sounds good. So you see now so here's our transaction value impact. Here now is our external delay cost. This is for the 30 days. We're up to 900,000 there. Now, how many colleagues are going to be participating?
Internal colleagues.
Yes, and you have to include colleagues from all functions, but don't include any transitioning employees.
That's project team employees you're talking, are you? The transitioning team?
Oh, it's not just so if I've got a team that's coming out of an integration management office, let's say, and I've got work stream lead.
Let's go for 40 then.
40. Okay. That sounds like a good number. Now here, so we see here that our total delay cost is now up to $16 million.
That is not a surprise. If you screw this project up, then that's not a surprise.
Right. So now I'm saying, okay, so if you adopt CRISP, I think the minimum amount of time that you're going to save is 5% off of your delay. So let's just use 5 as the low end of the scale here. It could be even more. And what's interesting about this, Craig, is that the more that you use the method, the faster it becomes because your communication keeps getting shorter and shorter.
Yep.
All right. So here we go. So the cost avoided with Cris comes out to be $816,860 with an ROI of 716. And that's based on a $100,000 investment.
Right.
Your mileage may vary.
Wow. Well, I have previously done Excel spreadsheets for that. And before you showed me that demo, I was thinking, oh, he's going to need to have an Excel spreadsheet to show all this because we've got to get it through the finance people. Otherwise, they're not going to understand the language.
Yeah.
So I was greatly relieved when you showed me this.
Yeah, look, we can put it in a spreadsheet, but the bottom line is this is what you're looking at in terms of, and you can play with this however you want. If you think the 20, let's say 20% is a little high on the how much is at risk in terms of the transaction. So you can cut. Let's say we cut this in half. Yes. So we lowered the percentage, the risk percentage from 20% to 10%, and it cut the crisp ROI down to 350% rather than 700 and something. But so that's just one initiative. And so when, like you mentioned, that you've got a client who's doing repeated acquisitions, for instance, this whole model starts getting very, very quick because over 80% of the data that you're using, especially if you're doing the same transaction type over and over again, you're going to have the same predictable data that's coming up, and so that essentially starts getting just wired into it, and it becomes a very, very quick communication for the whoever is essentially driving the method use, whether it be the seller or the buyer, because it's agnostic. It really doesn't care.
And you would get better at it as well through experience. So therefore, your statistics, your information is going to be more accurate as you move forward. And that was the same with, I set up a forecasting tool, a rather extensive spreadsheet, and they'd come to me with an opportunity and I'd be able to enter in the appropriate information and say, okay, this is where your liabilities are. This is how much it's going to cost to do this. This is the opportunity cost. So we'd quickly be able to go through, is this worthwhile? Is this not?
Perfect. So I look at all of that type of stuff, the strategy, the strategizing, right? The discussions on the tactical side, and all the various tools and techniques that are out there in order to do that, including your spreadsheet, right? And I say, that's great. There's a deliverable at the end of Craig's calculations. And that deliverable not just doesn't live within his work stream, it's got to live in finance, it's got to live in the executive suite, it's got to live in IT. And so that becomes a nexus point, and goes into the nexus point exchange. And so it's really this, and again, when I look at it, it's a reflection of what you would need to do as an independent coming in and saying, okay, I can't dictate that you're going to buy this platform or that you're going to install this piece of software, but what I can do is mold what you've got to essentially make that communication as efficient and as effective as you can. So there are ceremonies that are set up that do away with the predictive, like I said, There's no such thing as status. There's no such thing as priority. All of that gets essentially baked into these nexus points because your own self-interest, right? You're as a worker, the person who's doing the work, you're not going to commit to something either to deliver it or to use it um, that's going to go against what your current workload is. So you can factor that in better than anybody can, unless you're in an industry and or an organizational culture that is so tightly controlled. And in that case, I've got this other tool called the initial viability tool, which bumps up against my AI trained, my crisp AI trained chat module. And it says, okay, I'm going to ask you 11 questions. Put in these 11 questions about how your company does these types of transactions, and it will come back and give you an analysis of what you told it relative to adopting crisp and whether it makes sense or not. And if you're too small, it'll say you could do it, you might have some luck with it, but there's just not enough critical mass there to make it worth your while to adopt this approach. Likewise, and I had a conversation with a potential client that I did my due diligence before I met with them. And I said, well, I went out and I used AI to put together a format of all the transactions that you've done over the last 7 years based on your SEC filings. And I showed it to her and I said, is this pretty accurate? And she said, wow. She says, that would take us a little bit of time to put together. And I said, well, it wasn't like that, but it didn't take me much time to do it. But when I look at it, and this is part of who I am, and this kind of gets built into the tool or into the method as well. When I look at it, I said, this looks like you're working like a well-oiled machine here. You don't need what I have. And she laughed and she said, well, we're a machine, all right. As far as how well-oiled we are, that's a different story. So it's not for everybody. And the promotional literature and that type of thing says, look, if you're in a really tight command and control structure where you can't tolerate somebody who is actually producing the work on the line, interacting with the people who are going to be using what it is that they're producing, no, because you're already building in inefficiencies in terms of the communication layers and filters and distortion that happen in there, and that won't work. So don't, try it if you want to. I'm not going to stop you from buying it, although I might. Because I don't need somebody going out there and saying, yeah, well, we tried it and it didn't work. And it's like, well, yeah, because you took the initial viability test and you failed. It said no.
Yeah.
don't do this. And so I offer a guarantee with it too, Craig.
Well, a guarantee is not going to be much use for a person of someone post M&A if they've tried it already and it hasn't worked. It's guarantee I don't see as much use really.
Well, it's a guarantee that if we can define what faster, better, and cheaper are in the context of the first initiative that you do, that I can guarantee you that if you follow the rules and you do this, that you will see an improvement.
Nobody follows the rules. We got a new cookbook last night on air frying. And we're there, oh no, we don't like that. No, we haven't got that. We'll use this instead. And we had the meal last night. I know I've got no clue as to what it was supposed to look like because I can't go back in time and check it out. So nobody follows rules. Humans, they can't be relied on.
Well, yes, that's true, and we'll find out how more and more of that becomes true in hopefully, or not hopefully, but in definitely the next few years to come. It's a I do
Well, that sounds
presentations.
great, but I've got to go back to this spreadsheet idea. One of the components was replacing the network for a standard environmental network for this organization. So first thing was replace the network infrastructure. And I had the CFO come to me and say, oh, can we just replace half the network and use what we've got there? Well, yeah, you can, but it's not going to work. It's going to fail. And it's going to cost you more problems. It's going to cost reputation. Your staff are going to get frustrated. So no, this is the model. This is what we're doing. And that way, by dictating this is it, you don't get these nasty little humans coming in and saying, oh, but I don't want to follow the rules. That's it. There's no following it. That's it. It's simple. So, yes. Oh, this is just so bad for me because we've been doing so well. I've done a couple of podcasts on relationships and working with people, and now I've just shot that to hell in this last few sentences as well.
I refer to it as a method. It is
Method, okay.
as close to pure intellectual property as you can get. In that the delivery mechanism, by the way, is all online, and from an option basis, a client can essentially they don't have to acquire or do an on-prem location or anything, but it's all based on a common publishing platform, the WordPress publishing. So I can essentially lift the entire method and all the assets and drop it down into a client's operation if they want it that way. But here's something else that you will appreciate, I think. Because I have this bent towards using existing technical ecosystems in order to deliver this, I actually have in my AI model the training set up so that I can take almost any common platform and ask my tool, give me the crisp mapping, essentially, to whatever this tech ecosystem happens to be. So let's say, are you familiar with the deal room product?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. So I've got a set of instructions that say, if you're going to adopt CRISP, here's how you do it if you've got a deal room infrastructure. So here's what you need. Here's how you need to tickle deal room in order to essentially get the benefit out of what the method is recommending. And it
That's
goes
fantastic.
through and it's all set up. And I include that in the subscription price. That's part of it's not sold as a separate add-on that says, oh yeah, well, we can help you implement it. No, this comes along with it. We give you, you tell us what the infrastructure is, and we will give you step-by-step instructions that say, okay, here's how this piece of the method maps to what this piece of your infrastructure. At the same time, that's also the first part of that happens in not the initial viability, but there's a full scale viability analysis that goes on, because that's another gotcha area in terms of whether the method whether you can adopt it or not. But at the end of the day, the whole thing was built essentially to use just common office tools with a little bit of added protection or security for file transfers and that type of thing for confidential information. Other than that, the whole thing can run on a Microsoft Office or an open office platform for all of the artifacts that are involved. So
Okay.
it's really it's very It gets very granular, but it also is very expansive because it doesn't rely on anything other than this is the data that you really need to pay attention to.
Well, let us know when it goes live and when it's
Yeah.
available. That would be wonderful. We'll do another session on that.